it's Lindsey from Two Maine Friends in a Podcast. We're kicking off with our first giveaway. To enter, comment favorite on the episode you enjoyed most on Spotify or text us on Apple Podcasts. We can't wait to hear what you love. Have you ever tried a new restaurant because somebody recommended it to you and they talk so highly of it that your expectations were really high up there?
Oh, yes. And then you get there and it's nothing like they described, and then the food is terrible or like mediocre at best, and you leave really disappointed because you had this idea there's going to be an amazing experience and then you were just let down.
Absolutely. You and I go to coffee shops a lot.
Yeah.
And we typically like the same kind of stuff. We would say that the local coffee shop in the town down the road from here, we both enjoy it. And so if I recommend you a coffee place, you're probably gonna be like, oh, Lindsey likes it. It's probably going to be good. I'm not a coffee
connoisseur.
That's the word. But thanks for saving me.
Always.
But what if I recommend something to you and you don't like it?
Yeah, it's a letdown, right? Like you just are like, oh, well, maybe. So like if it happens once, you let it slide.
Sure.
But if it's a couple times in a row, then you just kind of learn their expectations are different. And what I prefer is also different. And then you just kind of take the recommendation with a grain of salt and say, okay, yeah, sure, that sounds great. And then you're probably not going to go there.
What about, so I had a friend visit for Thanksgiving and I took them to one of my favorite breakfast spots, and
which is also one of my favorites.
Right. So
love it.
Highly recommend it. And as they were eating their breakfast, their first bite, I was just like watching in anticipation because my expectation was that they were going to like it, but I set the expectation that they were going to like it because they're a foodie. And so I like couldn't even eat my food because I was waiting to make sure that like breakfast blew their mind.
Yeah.
And thankfully they liked it. Otherwise I would start to question what they like. And
100%. Yeah. So if you haven't noticed, we're talking about expectations today because that happens so often in friendship, and it can create a lot of frustration, and then it can get really difficult. So, Lindsey, have you ever experienced something like that in relationships?
Yeah, I think that when we're in relationships, it's easy to put our own narrative on what we think they should look like and how we think people should respond to us or act around us, or how much they should give back to us in those relationships. So absolutely, I think that I've always tried to be cautious of what I expect out of other people because I don't know what their day-to-day capacity is. I don't know if they've had a bad day. I don't know if they've had a good day, but I've certainly been caught up in, I expect this person to reciprocate what I'm giving back to them immediately almost, and then feel let down when they don't give back the energy that I'm putting in. It can certainly be a downer if you set those expectations too high. You know what I think the problem is with expectations, what I've learned through that is that rarely do we communicate what our expectations are.
And that's where it all goes awry, right? Like we have it in our head what we think is going to happen or how they should respond or how the food should taste, right? And when we're let down by that, the other person doesn't know. We already set them up for failure because our expectation of how they should respond or what they should say or whatever that isn't met by an unspoken thing that we've never discussed.
Absolutely. So then we start setting false expectations.
And then again, like that's where we create this narrative. And then all of a sudden we start believing this whole story that we've created in our own heads about, well, they don't like me, or they are out to get me and they're not really in this relationship for the right reasons because they're not following through. When in reality, have we said anything about those expectations for them to know where we're coming from?
Yeah. Let's put it in a practical, like day-to-day scenario. If you're holding a job, right? You show up to work and you hope to have clear communication and clear expectations set for you by your manager or by your lead. So you know exactly what you need to focus on that day, what tasks need to be done by the end of your shift. And that's there. But if those expectations aren't communicated to you, you've immediately been set up for failure.
100%. And I think that we do a disservice to our friends when we operate in the same way. And in any relationship, that we have. But it's so often the case where if we would have just said, hey, this is what I was expecting, or been more upfront about like where we were coming from, I think it would eliminate a lot of that frustration. I heard a quote recently that I wanted to share with you because it hits this right on the head. And it says, when your expectations and reality are different, so you have your expectations on one level, reality's at a different level, what's in the middle is stress. So to lessen the stress, we have to either lessen our expectations or change our reality. So one has to come down to meet the other. And I think that's so valuable for a visual to help us understand why we get so frustrated sometimes in our relationships, because we have set an expectation maybe up here that's really high, but the reality is below that area. So what's in between is our frustration because the people aren't meeting the standard of what we set. And so in order for us to lessen that stress and be able to move forward, we have to meet somewhere in the middle. So either my reality has to change or my expectations of the other people have to change. And when we can kind of come to a balance, then we'll have less frustration.
Yeah. What are some social expectations that we can put on people that they may not be able to meet?
Well, that's a great question. Maybe it's something simple as how soon they respond in a message, right? Like my expectations that you're going to respond to me within a few hours, but maybe you don't respond for a few days. Then I start to create this narrative in my head. Well, they don't want to talk to me, or maybe I hurt their feelings and they didn't say anything, or what's happening and why aren't they talking back to me? Like, did I do something? And then all of a sudden you have all of these questions and now we're upset about something that we have no business being upset about because they were at work for 2 days, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. And I mean, that's a really simple one. What about for you?
I think about conflict in relationships and expectations and how you navigate those so differently. For me, I want to process it and talk about it right away with you. Like I want us to talk it out. And that's something I've learned about myself over the years. But then I do have those relationships with people who need a few days. And I really had to learn not to put the expectation that they're going to be ready to talk about it when I'm ready to talk about it, and take that step back and allow them to have their time to process and lower that expectation that it's not going to look like the way that I process conflict or deal with conflict in my life, that I need to give them space to do that and lower the bar maybe a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really great example of how expectations can sometimes harm a relationship, because especially in conflict, it's already touchy, right? You've got people who address it head on. And some of us try to avoid it at all costs. So when we are confronted with it, it does take a minute to come up with the response, to know what we're feeling, to know how to say what we're thinking. And there's a lot to it. And so if our expectations are set really high, that can set somebody else up for failure. So I think going in with my husband says this all the time, always assuming the best, right? So like, I'm not coming at it with how dare you? It's more about, well, where are you coming from and how can we work through this together, rather than setting the expectation of you've hurt me, so I'm cutting you off.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I grew up in a household where I had a parent who used to live by the motto, expect the worst. So when the worst happens, you're not disappointed. And as I've gotten older, I don't love that anymore because I don't want to think the worst of people, of situations and things like that. So then that mindset for me over the years had always created negative expectations. I expect you to fail me. I expect you to mess up. I expect you to leave me. I expect you to not do good by me. And flipping that narrative around can cause so much freedom in your life.
Yeah. And it's really freeing too when you're assuming the best in somebody else, because then when they come to you with something that's disappointing or that doesn't meet your expectations, if you're assuming the best in them, you know that they're not out to like intentionally harm you or cause you this frustration. They've messed up. Or maybe it's that my expectation was too high, and them bringing this to light has made me realize, I need to lower my expectation. And I mean, we do that to ourselves, don't we? Where we set our expectations of ourselves to this ridiculous standard that nobody else would ever put on us. And then we sit in frustration because our expectations for how we live are so unattainable. And we set the bar so high that we then live in a perpetual state of frustration because we can't achieve what we've set for ourselves to do. And I know in my life, like I lived a lot of my life with that bar set to this unattainable goal. And then I was always let down because I didn't meet it. And I sat in frustration or was striving constantly to earn the approval or get the pat on the back or have somebody acknowledge what I was doing was okay. And at the end of the day, that's not a great way to live life. But learning that through that process, that it's okay to lower that standard to something that's actually attainable. It's good to have expectations, but in a framework that's helpful and not so high that we're, like that quote said, living in that state of frustration because reality isn't meeting that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of one of our favorite shows, Friends.
Yes.
And one of my favorite scenes in an episode was where they were bringing up the furniture to Ross's new apartment.
I love this episode.
And they had planned out exactly how they were going to bring this couch up to the stairs. So they had made the plan. They had the expectations of how this was going to work, and it did not work.
The couch was too big.
It was way too big. The measurements weren't right. The stairwell wasn't the right shape. And you just hear Ross screaming at his two friends, pivot.
Yes.
Pivot. Pivot. What if we created room in our relationships to easily pivot?
Yeah, that's so good.
To change the conversation, change the framework, if you will, for what needs to happen and where that relationship is going to go. It would be really disappointing and sad at the end of the day for us on a social aspect if we didn't pivot, because if we're setting these standards and these expectations of our friends and in our relationships with people in general, that they're going to hit the bar or hit the mark every single time, we're going to be really lonely at the end of the day because we're going to walk away from relationships because they didn't meet our expectations. Just like we were talking about with restaurants, if I go to a restaurant and I don't like the service and I don't like the food and, it doesn't hit the box in multiple places, I'm not going to go back. I might go back if the service was bad, but the food was really good. Maybe they were just having an off night. Maybe the food was really bad, but the service was really incredible. So I'll give it a second chance. But if it doesn't meet all of those expectations, I may not go back. But what if I acted like that in my social navigating, that, well, you didn't hit the box these 3 times. I'm not going to try anymore.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought to work through because we always want to help people. But if maybe the relationship, they're not hitting those boxes because we've said this 100 times, but they're not in the same season of life as you, or you've grown apart. And so what used to work doesn't work anymore. So is it a matter of having a conversation and figuring out where they're coming from, where you're coming from, to maybe get that reality and expectation to meet? Or is it a matter of, we've tried this and we've tried it and we've tried it and it's just not working? Maybe we do need to take a step back and reevaluate, where are we going with this relationship? What are we gaining from this relationship? Am I investing more and the other person's not reciprocating and that makes me feel frustrated? Mm-hmm. Am I not responding fast enough and that makes them frustrated and I just need to work on that? And just be real and vulnerable and say, I'm really sorry I'm bad at texting, but I want to do better, so I'm going to try to work on it. And then give space for, you have to be held accountable to that. Because when you say it out loud, that's when the accountability can come into play. But if you don't address it, then there can be no accountability.
Right. And I agree. I do think that there is a level of good expectations. That's where that framework is. But I think that at the end of the day, if we're just walking away from every relationship that we have because they're not meeting those expectations, we might need to do inner reflection and make sure that we're not setting the bar too high. Or maybe it's not even about where we have our bar set. Maybe it's perfectly fine, your expectations, but you haven't communicated to that person what you need in return from them as a friend to make you feel valuable and to make you feel like you are a part of that relationship. Because I think one of the biggest downfalls that we have is we say it a lot in our podcast, the word vulnerability. We don't like to be vulnerable. We don't like to share and put ourselves out there. But what if we communicate our expectations and we see the switch in that friendship, and all of a sudden we do feel included? We do feel like this is a friendship that's being reciprocated on both ends.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because vulnerability is the place that's going to happen, right? And in order for us to get there, we have to express what we're feeling. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to get caught up in the frustration or in the discontent that it's not meeting our expectations, that we forget we haven't actually said it out loud. Like, we've internalized this dialogue in our head over and over and over again. And we believe this narrative now because we've internally had this conversation, but we've never actually said it out loud. And what would happen if we said it out loud and have the conversation and say that thing to address it? And how much would that shift and help our relationships to grow if we're willing to try to have the conversation?
Yeah, I think that communication and expectations have to exist together in order to have healthy relationships and set healthy boundaries as well. Part of expectations is boundaries too. You have to know what you're willing to accept and what you're willing to not accept. Expectations comes with compromise on the other end of it. So you have to set the bar, but be willing to pivot whenever life demands a pivot. And sometimes life is just going to demand a pivot. Your friend might be in a different season of life and they can't meet the expectation that you have. Lower the bar.
Right.
Find a place to meet them in the middle.
Yeah. And be willing to lower the bar. I think that's a great way to look at it, because I think that would save a lot of relationships if we were willing to just bring the bar down a little bit. Like, would you hold yourself to the standard that you're holding your friend to?
Well, maybe you hold yourself to very high standards and you need to lower the bar in your own life as well and give yourself a little bit of grace and not set these high expectations that you're never going to reach. Maybe you just bring it down a couple notches, and when you exceed that expectation in your own life, you allow grace for other people to meet the expectations that you have as well.
Oh, I think that's huge, because how often, like you said, like, we set this bar so high that we're never going to get there. And then we live defeated because we can't get to where we want to be. But if we just set the bar a little lower and tried again, and then when we do succeed, it gives you that breath of fresh air. It gives you that motivation to try again. And I think it's important that we try to do that in our relationships too.
I agree. I think about any sport that you can play, there's a practice period, right? And when I played softball back in my childhood days, I remember our coach saying practice equals permanent. And you often hear like the conversation, practice equals perfect or means perfect. But he would always say practice equals permanent. And the more that you practice at whatever you're doing, the better you're going to be. And that mindset, that skill set, it's going to become permanent in your mind and you're not going to lose it. It's like they always say, riding a bike, it comes right back to you. And so I think with setting expectations, practicing setting expectations and practicing lowering the bar and having some grace in there is going to become a permanent fixture in your life. You're going to be like, okay, this person didn't exceed my expectations. They barely even met my expectations. Where can I pivot a little bit to make this a relationship that is compatible with each other, that we are going to be there for each other and not constantly feel like we're trying to grasp to make the other person happy all the time, because that is not a reciprocal friendship.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that, because I think it also would be beneficial to give ourselves and the people that we're in a relationship with room for failure, because then you can get up from failing and try again. But we don't often allow ourselves the permission to fail or to not meet expectations. And when we do, then that's when we feel frustrated or overwhelmed or disappointed. And it's okay to feel those things, but to not dwell there and that become your new home, right? Like, you're not meant to make home the spot where you fell down. You're supposed to get back up and try again. And I think if we could do that for each other and help each other get back up and say, yeah, we messed up here, or I was frustrated, but let's figure it out together. How much more would we be willing to try again if we were okay with failing? And I don't mean failing, and we always hear failure and it feels so negative and it feels very sad, right? Like, even now when I'm talking about it, like, I feel like that overwhelming disappointment. And And I think if we could maybe rework it so that it's not necessarily that we're failing, we need to try again and give ourselves permission to be okay with that space.
It's so cliche, but failure really is just the stepping stone to success. Mm-hmm. I'd rather fail a million times and know that I gave it my all and tried than never try at all, right? And so I do think that in relationships, we have to, on the flip side, like you're saying, if I fail, I need to give myself space to get up and move forward. But I think on the receiving end of that, you have to give your friend the space to fail and get back up again. We joked a little bit earlier today, we were talking about, like, sorry that I didn't do this week for the podcast. Sorry that I didn't post this much on social media. Sorry I didn't get back to you right away. And there was never a point of contention in that for either of us. And I think for me, coming into this podcast is we're here to have fun. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to set any expectations on either of us of what that looks like. It's just going to look the way that it looks, and we're going to roll with it. And you don't get frustrated with me when I'm fumbling my words and I say, no, just start over, No. We give each other that grace to just to have the fumble, to mess up, but know that we're going to be right there to support the other person at the end of the day. Even on a deeper sense in our relationships, if I'm walking through a dark season and I go silent for a little while, or if you're going through a hard time and you don't have the capacity to respond, we're never looking at the other person saying, well, you didn't answer my text, so you must not really care about me.
Right. No.
That's not a fair expectation
for
me to put on you when I don't know what you're walking through that day, that week. You have children, you have a husband, you guys run a full ministry. There's so much to your life and capacity. I work 2 jobs. We never know who's coming or who's going. So I think that our friendship has been a great example to me on how to just exist in our friendship, and give each other grace and give each other space. But know that we are still there because we do reciprocate in the moments that it matters.
Right. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm grateful that there isn't a lot of, moments when we've been super frustrated by that. And we've definitely grown in that area for sure. But I think that we all have areas of growth when it comes to expectations just in life, right? Like whether it's relationships or the restaurants that we pick or whatever, right? Like we joke, there's different camps of people for like just different Chinese restaurants in our area. And no one that I know is ever in the same camp. And so it's like this thing, right? Because our expectations are this restaurant, but their expectations are this restaurant, and they're different and we can't agree on it, but we just laugh about it. And I wish that in life we could maybe take a more lighthearted approach to being open to we're trying to figure this out together. So we don't know what we're doing. I don't know what I'm doing half the time or most of the time. And so if we were willing to have more grace for each other in these moments where we're just trying to figure it out and maybe approach expectations with, I'm just trying to figure this out. And I kind of picture a ladder, right? Like you're trying to climb up and do better or become a different version of yourself or whatever that looks like. And you're trying to climb this ladder, but what if the rung is missing? Right? You have to reach up a little bit higher, and that's not as easy, and it kind of throws off your balance, and maybe you do lose your balance and your foot slips and you kick the person underneath you. You didn't mean to kick them. You lost your balance. And I hope that we could maybe reframe expectations to helping us just move up the ladder in life rather than this gymnastics bar that people are flipping on, and it's just a mess.
Mass chaos in your relationships.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a perfect place to kind of wrap up this week's episode with a couple thoughts as you go into your week. How are you setting the bar in your relationships? What are the expectations that you have on other people? And are they healthy expectations? Are they realistic expectations? And have you communicated with them? Is there someone who's not meeting the expectations that you have? And is that because maybe they don't realize what those expectations are? That's a wrap on this episode of Two Maine Friends in a Podcast. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. You can also send us an email at twomainefriends@gmail.com. And as always, leave us a review wherever you're listening.